Me, don't know, can't hear. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this city council meeting for February 18th to order, and note for the record that Mayor Malfeld, Andy Fury, and Giuseppe Caltabiano are all excused this evening due to travel constraints that they are subject to, and so they can't be with us this evening. That said, I'd like to ask Phyllis Klopman to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic with liberty and justice for all. Phyllis, I apologize. I don't usually cold call people. Thank you, though. Exactly. Next, we have communications from the public. This is public comment that we'll take on any matter that is not a public hearing on this evening's agenda. Any member of the public wish to speak?
Good evening. My name is Chris Schustrom. My address is 504 Spokane Avenue. I have the pleasure of helping to organize the winter decorations for town with a great committee of local business and residents, and I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be taking the decorations down this Sunday, February 23rd, and volunteers who might be available to help should meet at the corner of 3rd Street and Central Avenue at right around 8:45 a.m. And hopefully, knock wood, everything goes well. It'll take a few hours, and we're happy to buy lunch for everyone who helps out at the Great Northern Bar and Grill afterwards. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else? Richard?
Mr. Deputy Mayor and councilors, as a part of the Fire Safe Flathead Information Series, Thursday, February 27th at between 6 and 8 p.m. in the Arts and Technology Room at FVCC. Erica Fisher, a PhD forestry expert at Oregon State University, will be delivering a lecture with information and an opportunity for questions. She'll be unpacking the impact of wildfires on our communities, and the wildfires are overwhelming suppression efforts and causing significant damage to vital community infrastructure, including utilities, health care, and schools, leading to prolonged recovery periods. She will explore how past fire exclusion policies combined with climate change have contributed to the current challenges. She'll discuss cutting-edge research on wildfire impacts to critical infrastructure and strategies for high-risk communities to adapt and mitigate fire risks. And so I encourage all of you and the counselors that are not here to attend that, as well as any staff, particularly planning staff. This will be really interesting. I've read some of her work, and she is cutting edge, and she'll be, I'm sure, talking about some of the things that happened in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Good evening. My name is Paul Burton. I'm a homeowner in the Tamarack Ridge neighborhood up west of State Park Road. It's on item 7 of your agenda tonight. Just wanted to add a little color around this. Tamarack Ridge is a very small neighborhood that abuts State Park Road and just above Old Town. And as the staff report indicates, the neighborhood was platted in 2017. It includes Hagen Heights above Ice House, Merganser Court, and Harlequin Court. In 2020, the city accepted a dedication for Hagen Heights, just that section above Ice House, into the city's public roads. So taking a privately developed road into the public road system. Our roads, both Harlequin and Merganser, were not part of that, but they are also built to the same standard. Tonight's request is a request by the HOA for the city to take dedication of those 2 streets in the same manner they did with the Hagen Heights component. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, when we do you say this? When we took Ice House in, or when, sorry, Hagen Heights got converted, it created a disparity among homeowners. There are 7 lot owners now on Hagen Heights paying the higher public assessment fee, public street assessment fee, and the rest are not. So in bringing the 2 Merganser and Harlequin Court streets into the city, we would all be paying the higher public fee, which creates equity among all the homeowners. And then secondly, the increase in homeowner association fees, well, not fees, but the revenues will offset both the snow plowing, and as the city reports in their staff report, the road is in very good shape. It's got 8 to 10, 12 years left, so you would be gathering the public fees as opposed to the private fees over the course of that time. So those were kind of the points we wanted to bring up that was a little more color than the staff report had in it. Thank you. And we have, we'll be here later if you have any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else for public comment this evening? Michelle, anybody online?
Those of you, so Brad, I think you're wanting to speak towards the public hearing that's not open yet. So I will keep that in mind unless you have something else to speak that's not a public hearing. Go ahead and unmute your mic if you would like to. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, great. Next, we have communications from volunteer boards. Any volunteer boards in the audience that wish to make a report? Not seeing any. Any member of the council on volunteer board report?
No, but I will have something to talk about at the end of tonight's meeting.
Great. Okay. Not seeing any. We'll move on now to our consent agenda. And I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second by Councilor Cornell. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That matter passes unanimously. Michelle. Next, we have a couple of public hearings scheduled. One is a consideration of a request from Whitetail Ridge Holdings LLC to amend Condition 7 of the WPP 2402, a 73-lot subdivision located on Flathead Avenue and West 18th.
Evening.
Good evening.
That's why I'm here. So this is a request by Whitetail Ridge Holdings to amend condition number 7 to allow tree removal within the building envelopes on individual lots while also clearing the rights of way. This project was approved by the council back in June, subject to 21 conditions. And again, it's a 73-lot subdivision with 59 single-family detached units and 14 townhouse sublots. The applicant's working toward meeting the conditions of approval and will be installing infrastructure once the engineering plans are approved. As part of preparing for the installation of infrastructure, they're asking for the amendment to condition number 7 to strike the first sentence as identified in the staff report on page 27 of your packet. The intent of this condition was to prevent the complete clear cutting of the subdivision and allow the future homeowner to determine trees to be preserved based on their particular site plan. Once sites are disturbed through tree removal and other earthwork, noxious weeds can take hold. And then finally, the full build out of the neighborhood can take many years, during which there are many benefits to retaining the trees. However, on the other hand, there are efficiencies with removing all the trees at the same time, and the use of heavy equipment could cause damage to city streets when the trees are removed lot by lot. In addition, as noted by the attached comments from the fire chief, there are safety considerations to reducing the fuels, to creating defensible spaces, and protecting infrastructure and homes for emergency access at the beginning of the project before the homes are introduced. The subdivision regulations are silent on the timing of tree removal. And then the applicant did submit a map showing what they're proposing to do, the areas that they'd like to remove. We did notice adjacent landowners put a legal in the paper. We did receive 2 comments that are in your packet from neighbors that are not in support of the request. We're not offering a recommendation, but recommend that you carefully listen to public comment and the applicant's proposal before making a decision. If the council does recommend approval of this amendment, we would suggest including measures to clearly identify in the field the extent of the tree removal, because the pins aren't in the ground yet at this point. And measures to protect the trees that are intended to be retained, including ongoing inspections and long-term measures to ensure that noxious weeds don't take hold. If the council does not recommend approval, we would recommend the council amend the condition to remove, or to allow tree removal in the 10-foot dry utility easement that's located along the fronts of all the lots. This is where cable, gas, electric all go. So this would enable the full 60-foot right-of-way clearing plus 10 feet on either sides. Can I answer any questions for you?
Any questions, Rebecca?
Oops. Yeah, I'm kind of confused because we have a tree retention policy now, right? So you're asking us to determine the extent of the trees that we want retained
Well, the
versus our staff?
Well, the condition of approval says that trees on individual lots may not be removed during infrastructure installation unless deemed hazardous by a qualified professional. And that was a condition that was part that you added, or we, staff included. That's not in the subdivision regulations. It was just the trees were really important. We wanted to make sure that they were thoughtfully removed at the time. So they're asking to remove trees in the building envelopes as well as the right-of-way all at the same time, instead of on a lot-by-lot basis. So that would be an amendment to the conditions of approval that you approved.
So I'm confused about when our arborists work with the developers to determine which trees remain.
They'll hire someone who will identify which healthy trees will remain.
Oh, that's right. So,
Our arborist looks at public trees in the rights of way.
and this has not happened yet? There's been no assessment by an arborist about any of the trees?
I don't believe so. That would be something that would get submitted later on.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Ben, go ahead.
So this is not a part of the subdivision regulations, this is a condition of approval specific to this project.
Right, correct.
Is this a standard condition that is generally reused amongst all projects?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of has become pretty standard.
Okay, and just curious, why is that a condition and not a part of the regulations themselves?
I mean, I guess we just haven't gone back and amended that particular section.
And would staff continue to recommend this condition for all other subdivisions going forward?
Probably the ones that have significant trees on the site. Some subdivisions, they're infill, there's no trees, it's not necessary.
And there's no recommendation from staff on this?
Kind of see both sides of it.
Go ahead, Steve.
So I'm curious about the last thing you said, was that if we don't move forward with this change, that we continue, that we at least allow them to remove the trees from the dry utility easement
Which is the front 10 feet on each lot.
on each lot. Okay, so that they would be able to remove any trees in those areas without having to use their arborist to determine which
Right.
ones should stay and should go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that would be an okay substitute if
Yeah,
we decide not to allow them to do the
The-
whole thing.
right, clear
Okay.
the building envelopes.
Thank you.
Wendy, I mean, I guess my question is, it makes some sense to me that if you're gonna use big equipment to remove trees, why would you insist that infrastructure go in before you did that? Are you telling us that they have not identified the trees that they would normally cut on each building lot yet?
I think that's true, yeah.
Okay, so,
Just because they don't know the extent of the houses and
okay.
exact driveway locations and.
Are they going to wait to take any of the trees out until they identify that? Or they want to?
No, that's what the plan shows, and the drawing is on page. Page 36 of your packet. You can see the layout of the subdivision, and everything in gray is all the trees that would be removed.
Well,
And then the area, the big wide green area, kind of to the left, to the west, is the open space area that they're preserving. That's their parkland dedication, and then some of the lots, they're quite deep, and so it won't go all the way back. It'll just be within the setback area.
Please, go right ahead.
Wendy, is this what you're referring
Yeah.
to? So there would be no trees all
In the gray area, that's what they're proposing to remove. Streets plus the building envelopes.
Please, go right ahead.
Have we consulted with any sort of fire-wise people to see if those trees would be removed anyway, no matter what? If the housing,
Oh, I mean, the lot lines aren't out there, so it'd be really, I think, hard at this point to determine exactly.
okay, so if we don't have lot lines yet, we don't really know exactly where the lots are gonna be, but but we're gonna allow them to take out the trees?
I mean, they'll figure that out. I mean, that's gonna be part of the tree removal, is they'll be figuring
Okay.
out exactly where those areas are.
Okay,
It just hasn't been final platted yet, so the pins aren't in the ground at
Gotcha.
this point.
okay.
Rebecca, go ahead.
So on this diagram, is there any buffer whatsoever between the neighborhood and the build out here?
Right,
It
yeah.
looks like there's only a few trees, but no trees along here.
Well, some of the lots are deeper and some of them are shallower, so applicant could probably explain.
Okay.
Ben?
Would we be asking them to survey the location of like some of this, for example, there's these narrow strips where there's trees that would theoretically remain between lots. Would we be requiring them to survey the locations of all the trees and,
They're gonna have to identify, according to this plan, how they're removing the trees and protecting the ones that they're intending to protect. So
And-
that was the recommended
okay?
condition.
And
If
would
you-
we play any role in the oversight of that process or not?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think we'd need to go out there and inspect it and make sure that, what they're proposing here is what's in the field and.
Okay.
Rebecca, go right ahead.
Who would be doing those inspections?
Probably myself, planning staff.
Oh, okay, so you deal with tree retention now?
Well, I mean, they would show where they're, based on this, show us, where you're going to save trees and where you're not going to, where you're gonna remove. We wanna see what that looks like in the field.
I apologize.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I just had one last thing. Would we be requiring it to be revegetated?
Well, they'd need to do something to show that the noxious weeds aren't gonna take hold. Whether it's seeded, I don't know what they would do. Question for them. I mean, that's something that they typically have to do on construction sites anyway, is erosion control and seeding, just to make sure the noxious weeds don't take over.
My turn? Question, if I'm looking at this, it looks to me like we're just gonna go in and clear cut all of this stuff. And the only thing we're leaving is the stuff that is in the tree green. All the gray stuff, are they talking about doing selective tree cutting in the gray areas?
Be a good question for them.
I think it probably would be. Okay, I'll let that go then. Thank you. We've announced this as a public hearing, and one of our traditions is to allow the proponent of the motion to speak first. So,
Good evening. My name's Eric Mulcahy with Sands Surveying to Village Loop, and I'm representing the applicants, and they're with me in the back there as well. So the reason we asked for this request is we didn't realize when you guys crafted the condition in the council meeting to exactly what extent it went to. Because it's very typical that the building sites get logged and graded as you're grading the roads so that you get all the proper drainage. And it's also the efficiency of getting your infrastructure. So you would not selectively thin a building site, because when you build the house, you would have to go cut the tree anyway. So these lots are not big. These lots are 10,000 square feet and smaller, and they have mature trees on them, so they're big trees. And our concern is that if we can't log the building sites while we're logging for the infrastructure, and remember, the full 60 feet plus 10 feet for the dry utilities are gonna be logged regardless. It's cleared. That whole section gets essentially logged, the trunks are removed, and you get sewer pipe, water pipe, stormwater pipe, asphalt, curb, gutter, boulevards, sidewalks, then gas and electric and telephone go within that 80 feet of right-of-way and easement. And it's full. It's full from end to end. There's no room for a tree trunk other than what you would plant back in the boulevard between the utilities. So these lots are going to be cleared. It's just whether we can do it now or whether we have to wait until after all the roads are in, all the street lights are in, the street trees are in, the fire hydrants are in, and other houses are being built and people are parking in the street, and then we're gonna have to try to get a piece of logging equipment in there to take these large trees down without hopefully having them fall and destroy infrastructure or a house that's nearby. We're not asking to clear cut the whole site. We're leaving areas, basically the side yards between the units and more than what the setback would be in the rear. So we're basically taking like a, basically a 50 by 50, 50 by 60 building envelope and clearing that so that somebody can come in and build a 2,000 square foot house and pretty much not have to take any more trees, or if they do, it would be with the arborist and that sort of thing. So that's really what we're asking to do. It's a matter of timing, safety, and efficiency. And like I said, they're going to be taken out regardless.
Thanks. You have a question?
How much space is there between the building sites?
So the city has 10-foot side yard setback, so it's 20 feet of area in between the lots.
So how many trees do you think you'll be able to retain in that 20-foot section?
It'll just depend on what's there. And typically, I mean, we can go out and survey the lot line and create the offsets, but also all of this heavy equipment has GPS capabilities now. So basically, we set a station out on the property, and they use their GPS to essentially tell them where they're at and where they're supposed to be grading and thinning.
Is there another option besides us deciding to give you permission to do this, where you could actually go out and do a survey so that people know what's going to be taken and what's going to be left in those 20-foot sections before you proceed, so it doesn't look like an absolute clear cut? I mean, is there any way to get more surety that more trees will remain?
Well, again, we're talking fairly small lots. These are like city standard lots. So, a typical downtown lot's about 7,500 square feet, and you know how much those homes take up. These are a little bit bigger, but we also have more setback where we're leaving the trees in the rear. But there's going to be trees, but it's not going to be a forest. It's going to be a subdivision. When this thing is built out, there's going to be homes, and people are going to be planting new trees where they're in the areas. And The other thing is when you build a house, you can't have a tree like 3 feet away from the house because you will have severed its roots when you put the foundation in.
Out, and then it becomes dangerous to leave up because it can fall on the house that you just built.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. I just was hoping there'd be an easier way for the public to accept that you're actually clear cutting the land when there's such a huge forest there right now.
Well, I mean, we could flag it, and show with flagging where we're going to cut, but, it's not, the property's not open to the public necessarily, but, I mean, particularly the people that live next to it would be able to see, where the flagging ends before their backyards.
And yeah, and then would they be able to see what the buffer might be for them from that if you were able to do
Yeah.
that? Okay, and then you could actually show what trees would remain for their benefit too.
Well, we would just leave whatever trees were there, unless an arborist deemed they were hazards.
Yeah, this is a hard decision. I understand exactly what you're saying about the construction piece of it, for sure. It's just that the loss to the community is a beautiful forest, and I think we're trying to retain some of that sense with the build out.
Well, the build out's going to be the build out. I mean, if you look at that plan, there's a number on the side that you can't really see. So the area we're proposed to log is 15 acres. The area that's not being logged is 19 acres. So over half the site is not going to be touched.
But the part that you're building out will have a direct effect on the people adjacent to it.
It's just like their homes. So if you go into O'Brien Bluffs, those are 10,000 square foot homes. They're probably a quarter of that site was heavily forested, and you can see what trees are remaining in that part of it. And that's just the nature of urban scale development in a forested area. There's just, when you build the roads, you put in the driveways, you put in a modest size house, and you look at the safety factors, there's not a whole lot of trees that remain, other than usually in the backyard, where you kind of see those urban forests are like half acre to an acre size lots, and these aren't that big.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah. Eric, this isn't the first development you've been part of, right? Is it standard procedure to go in and remove all the trees from lots? I'm just trying to click back in my memory of a lot of the things that we've seen, and it seems like there's a selective thinning process that goes on first, and then the lots are platted out, and then when somebody comes in to develop it, then the rest of the trees are cut and the lot is graded. So that reminds me of the more typical process, and I certainly understand what you're saying about that this is not a clear cut. We're just clearing the places that are going to be built out anyway.
Right.
And I totally understand that. I'm just wondering, am I wrong in my assessment of the way that a subdivision gets built like that?
Most of them will go in and log it and log out the building sites because people want to see where they can build. A lot of people can't visualize a site if it's full of trees. So they do that, and the right-of-ways always get cleared. I mean, you just have to.
Yeah, I understand that.
But, the other, where they haven't clear-cutted, they have done extensive thinning. And Rock Ridge is an example. Some project I worked on in Lakeside, or that way, down in Big Fork, where they send a logging crew through and they do extensive firewise thinning, and then basically we build the infrastructure because the right-of-ways are thinned, and then the homeowners can come in and and take out a few trees for their house because it's already been thinned pretty well once. So, but it's still, they will be taking more trees out as they build their homes.
Right, and I'm just wondering why, is there a reason why you wouldn't do that here?
Primarily just because I think they're looking at a build out that's gonna be fairly quick on this. It's a single phase subdivision. And so when the lots go up for sale, they're gonna go to builders to build, and we know that there's a lot of builders looking for lots. So we think it's gonna go fairly quickly, but
Is there extensive grading that needs to happen on these lots? Because that's the other thing you said, is that the lots will be cleared and graded so that you could have a building site ready to go.
well, the lots need to be graded where the houses are so that they flow to either the street or to another drainage. And that's the case pretty much with all residential development, is you've got to get the grades so that you can get the water off the site and it's not flooding a neighbor, and it goes to where it needs to go so that it can be treated and detained.
And that would be, how much more difficult would that be if you wait lot by lot to do it?
It can be done lot by lot.
Okay.
It's just more difficult, and we could do thinning and let the lot owners come in and do a few trees, but it's just more efficient to take care of it.
Sure, okay, certainly, I understand, thank you.
Rebecca?
If we approved just the utility easement part of this, and then had you come back to do more of the identification in the field of what you're actually taking, do you think that would work, or it's an either or for you?
Like have an arborist identify individual trees on each lot that would be removed? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
or kept, yeah.
Oh. Nothing's gonna be kept in a building envelope. It's just,
So it'd be only the 20-foot areas, and you
Well,
might
they're-
not even keep anything in those areas?
no, there's 20 foot we can keep, and the backyards we can keep. Generally speaking, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and you have to put a driveway, 25 feet off the road right away into the garage, and then you've got 20,000 square feet of home, it's gonna eat up a lot of that lot.
Any other questions for Eric? We did announce for a public hearing. Anybody wish to speak on this matter? Richard?
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, Deputy Mayor, Councilors. Richard Hillner, 104 Fifth Street, Whitefish. I am concerned initially, my concern was that this was something that was agreed to, and then the developer comes back and says, oh, that was not, that's not going to work, it's not going to pencil, or whatever it's going to be. And then I just heard we didn't recognize what was required, a statement by the proponent. It seems to me that that is the responsibility of the developer and not of you all who put this condition in to begin with. The real concern that I hear is that it's expensive and it's inconvenient. It seems to me that is a cost of doing business. I look at the vegetation. It is my assessment when I drove in the vicinity of the development. It is primarily western larch, which is a fire-resistant tree. The tree removal, it seems, in my view, should be based on, if you're looking at fire potential, has to be on the home ignition zone, or the HIZ. The argument that it is going to be hard on the asphalt and the curbs and gutters. The city removes and has removed trees all over the city when necessary, without damage to the streets and without damage to our curbs. The most critical fire consideration, in my view, is what we do to make ours a fire resilient and adapted community, and that will go right back to when these buildings are created and built, to look at the building codes, building materials, and fire resistant landscaping. I don't see anything that, it just occurred to me when Wendy was talking about the boulevards and Eric was talking about the boulevards. I don't see a tree planting plan for the boulevards once those are created. But I encourage you to stick to your guns. This is what you agreed to. This is what you developed when you approved of this subdivision. And it's now, the onus is on the developer to comply with your recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Anybody else this evening? Yes.
Hi there. My name's Richard Dugan. I live on Sawtooth, so in O'Brien Bluffs. And I heard the original presentation and agreement, and I don't see where anything's changed. I just heard that it changed because they want to do something different, and I don't buy that. You know, the agreement was there. I don't see what's changed, and I'm not sure I understand from the plat here exactly how much room is there and whether those big trees in there, not all of them, of course, but like on the edges and so forth, will be saved. And in our neighborhood, that makes a big difference. They're there right now. And I can't help but be reminded of the town pump. Beautiful trees when you came into Whitefish and you left, those big evergreens. Gone. Price of doing business. They weren't supposed to be gone, so they had to put in Christmas trees to make up for it. And I just think that's a shame. That's all.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Sure.
Hi, my name's Walker Corum. My parents used to own this property, family actually. You guys read the letter that my dad wrote on June. Some of you guys were here, I know. Anyways, I'm also going to be a part of the clearing crew that will be doing the logging, said logging on this property. This property's been in my family since the 60s. So we've thinned it already in the early 2000s. And when this property was sold, we as a family stressed the importance of leaving the maximum amount of trees possible in this subdivision, knowing that there was going to be the clearing of roads, utilities, and building lots. And we feel that this has been very well attained in this map that is currently up that you guys have seen, that has been brought before you. The main thing I'm stressing today is the safety factor with the lot clearing. So when we go in, we have specific machines that can handle these trees in a safe manner. They can be laid down. They will not be going out through all the leaf trees per se, so they can be packed from the lots out into the roads, laid down nicely so that you're not raking the limbs off of the leaf trees and knocking the tops out of the leaf trees. So it's, you know, you can go out there, you can grab the ones you want, you can take them to where you want to lay them down safely. That's the biggest thing that we're seeing in this is the safety factor. When people that are not qualified to be taking trees down, building specific type people, they could tip one over into somebody's house, they could damage light poles, vaults, fire hydrants, you name it. I mean, these lots are not super big, so, you know, 100 and some foot tall tree, you don't really want that one going through your neighbor's house. So, like I said, we will have the proper equipment on site when we're doing the roads and the utility easements, and the lots are going to be cleared regardless. We know this is a subdivision. There's going to be houses built in it. So now's the time to do it, and that's what I got. So thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other public comment this evening? Any online, Michelle?
Brad, are you interested in speaking towards this item or just the next public hearing? If you could maybe unmute your mic if you are, please. We're good.
Good, thank you. I'll close the public hearing at this time and turn it over to council for hopefully a motion and then discussion.
I would move that we modify condition 7 to state that the tree on individual lots may not be removed during infrastructure installation unless in the dry utilities easement or deemed hazardous by a qualified professional.
Discussion?
So I build houses for a living, and I think the point that it is a lot more efficient to clear trees now is well taken. With that said, my experience has been that depending on who the homeowner is or who the HOA is, that sometimes they tend to be a little more thoughtful about which trees to remove than what is proposed here. For example, maybe they really like the big tree in the front yard, so they'll shift the driveway this way. Or maybe there's this really nice tree on the side that we're not going to build the whole width of the lot, so maybe we'll shift the building over here and keep this nice big tree. And I think that can bring a lot of value to the people who eventually move there. And so I think on that basis, I mean, most neighborhoods I've seen in this town have trees on the lots before they're built. Sometimes they sit there for many years before anything actually is built. And I also think it's hard to grade the lot without clearing all the trees, including on the sides. Otherwise, you can't do it. So anyway, on that basis, I think a better neighborhood, a better finished product can come out of leaving the trees in the main part of the lot and allowing the homeowners to decide which ones they would like to keep. And therefore, that is the motion that I propose here.
Rebecca?
Yeah, as much as I do agree with you that it's much easier to take everything at once, I think this is a really amazingly beautiful piece of property, and I agree with Ben that some of the people that will buy the lots might want to actually preserve the trees and build a house around trees even. But the other part is water runs through this location all the way to the Whitefish River, so it's really important to also preserve those trees for water retention as well. And I think it's okay to do the utilities and then be thoughtful in the design thereafter. So that's why I'm not approving your proposal to clear cut everything. But thank you for taking such good care of the property all these years too.
first of all, I just want to push back. Sorry, Rebecca. They're not proposing to clear cut everything. That's kind of the fear, is that it's going to be a giant clear cut and they're going to take all the trees. That's not what they're proposing. I do support your motion, Ben, for many of the things you said. I also just want to add to that there's a lot of lots in here. It's not going to get built overnight. I understand the efficiency that it would cause to take all the trees now, and I certainly understand the safety issue as well. I also just don't think we need to clear every lot now. I think some selective thinning. You said you've thinned it in the 2000s. Maybe there could be some more thinning that happens. Maybe not according to what we're doing or what the conditions are. But this is not an overnight subdivision. This is going to take a long time to build these homes and to sell to even. I mean, you don't even have the lots pinned yet. So by allowing you to go in and take trees out in all those envelopes, I just think we need to be more sensitive to that particularly in this area. I do appreciate how thoughtful you've been about looking at, okay, where are we going to save trees, because that's important, and also preserving the backyard, creating a bigger backyard setback for not removing any trees, especially along where it matches up with O'Brien Bluffs. I appreciate those things. I don't think it would be it's not the right choice to allow you to change it so that you can remove the trees from the building envelopes at this time.
I would have to defer to my friend Ben on building envelopes. I appreciate the idea that these are smaller building envelopes, but on a personal level, my parents chose on a very small lot in a very different place to keep a very nice big tree and literally build their house around it. I think there's value to you guys not clear cutting those things. That's not necessarily something the decision I should have to make, but I think there is some value to that, to you and to the community. And when this was approved, and I think you guys knew this, and we appreciated everything you've done here, you knew that the whole concern was that we were going to go in and literally clear cut all these lots without saving what could be very nice trees that could easily a building envelope could be created being sensitive to those trees. I'm going to have to say that I'm going to support the motion on that basis, but and it's because of that uncertainty and what the community bought when they asked us to put that condition on it. I think that's what we kind of have to stay with for the time being. So thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. That matter passes unanimously. Sorry, guys. Next item is our resolution 2505, a resolution revoking a conditional use permit, WCUP 24-05.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. So back in July 21st of 2024, you guys approved a conditional use permit, WCUP 2405, for a private airplane hangar to be developed as an accessory use to the Whitefish Airport. And it was subject to 5 conditions of approval. One of those conditions, conditions 1, stated that the applicant must demonstrate continued compliance with all adopted city codes and ordinances. After that was approved, we received a letter of appeal contending that the zoning administrator made an error of interpretation with regard to whether or not that hangar was required to have a 300-foot setback. That appeal went to the Whitefish Community Development Board in January of this year, and the board, acting as the Board of Adjustment, held a hearing, and they agreed with the appellant that there was an error of interpretation, and therefore a 300-foot setback should have been applied. And since that, with the site plan that was approved as part of that CUP, where that hangar would be located would not meet a 300-foot setback. So based on that, that particular permit probably needs to be revoked because they would not be able to build that hangar in compliance with all adopted city codes and ordinances. So based on that, staff recommends that this conditional use permit be revoked by the city council. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Dave, currently the CUP is suspended, right?
Yep, we wrote a letter suspending it until this hearing could be held.
Okay, and how long is something like that allowed to be in suspension before the council needs to revoke it?
There's no timeline.
There's no time limit. So conceivably, we could just leave it suspended for some time?
Well, it's, the code dictates that a hearing be held after it's suspended in a reasonable time frame, with a date set. So, I mean, that's what this is. So you probably need to either decide whether to revoke it or, allow the CUP to be valid, and they would have 18 months to build it in order for the CUP to be met.
So the language in the ordinance or in the law is that a reasonable time frame that the city council has to hear it and vote on it within a reasonable time.
It just says, in an event for a failure to comply, the zoning administrator will suspend any conditional use permit, immediately notify the city council, and set a date for the hearing to determine if the suspension shall be lifted or if the conditional use permit shall be revoked. City council shall be the hearing body. And in the case of the revocation, the determination of the council is final unless recourse is sought in the court of record. So yeah, there isn't really a timeline, but
Okay.
it does put the imperative on the council to make a decision.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Good, Ben.
So after reading all of this, my understanding is essentially that the zoning interpretation that was decided by the Community Development Board is final, and there is essentially nothing, we really don't have choice but to revoke this. I mean, is that accurate?
That was our determination.
I don't think is there any other choices to consider here? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Wendy or staff? At this time. We published this as for reasons that actually escape me, public hearing, given that the fact that we have no option here. But we published this for a public hearing, and so I'll open that public hearing now. Anybody wish to speak?
My name is Kate McMahon. I live at 151 Wedgewood Lane in Whitefish, and I was one of the appellants. And I just wanted to say that I agree with the staff's assessment, staff report, and urge the council to pass a resolution, to revoke. Thank you.
Yes.
My name's Mike Casey. I live at 195 Blanchard Lake Road in Whitefish. From what I'm hearing, I understand that you have no choice, but I'd like to make this public record. I did submit a letter earlier last week. I hope you had the opportunity to read it. I'm here to support development of the hangar at the Whitefish Airport. I previously submitted a letter to the council, which I just read, which I hope you've read. In my hand is a documents I've collected regarding the construction of the hangar on the state land at the airport that has been in present location for 60 years. Last I counted, this document exceeded over 100 pages. I know you all are wore out with the word hangar. The reason there is so much documentation is that the appellants have attempted to baffle you with misinformation. I could go on about the 300-foot setback, whether from the property line or from the airstrip. It is from the airstrip, by the way. If somebody had called the state, they would have confirmed that. But we all agree that the current code is ambiguous. This is why, when asked, the planning director provided his interpretation of the code's intent, which he helped write in 2014. His interpretation was spot on. That said, I would like to address whether the appellants were specifically aggrieved. I attended the Whitefish Community Development Board meeting on January 16th and quickly identified the board had arrived with a preset agenda. I stayed for the entirety of the meeting and listened to excessive amounts of legal mumbo jumbo regarding setback and zoning code, yet very little discussion about whether upholding the appeal was justified or if the appellants were in fact specifically aggrieved. After Mr. Taylor gave clear and concise interpretation of the code's intent, Development Board chose to ignore staff's recommendation, and he even went so far as to question his integrity. I do not know Mr. Taylor personally, but I assume his position as a planning director requires a high level of integrity. I do know Mr. McKinney. I have known him for over 30 years. I can guarantee his integrity without question. Mr. McKinney did everything by the book, yet he has been unfairly made to look like some sort of villain. How dare he propose a hangar at an airport? That's why Mr. McKinney is not here. Almost immediately after City Council approved the conditional use permit, in July of last year, the appellants hired an attorney. They then launched a campaign of misrepresenting facts in an effort to mislead you. They have led the public to believe that if the hangar is built at the Whitefish Airport, planes will fall out of the sky, hangars will explode, and people from all over the country will come fly their experimental aircraft there. This is simply not true. The appellants have stated 5 reasons for grievance. They live near the airport and will directly be affected by expansion of the future improvements. This is a grievance against the airport, not about building a hangar. They use Armory Park, as many others do. They claim potential scenic values may be affected. Sure, if you stand in just the right place and purposely put the hangar in direct line of sight. This is no different from any other recent construction in Whitefish. They submit comments during the CUP public hearing with questions regarding the administration's certain zoning provisions. This is a grievance against you guys. There is no record in the CUP public hearing, staff report, public discussion, or findings inserting the Whitefish Airport is non-conforming use. Again, a grievance against the airport and the fact that it's non-conforming. They are residents of the state of Montana, so am I. Simply being a resident and paying taxes does not constitute a specific grievance. By the way, that property is not paid for by tax dollars. The zoning administrator did not make an error in his interpretation, nor was the appellant specifically aggrieved. Yet the Community Development Board chose to ignore this. Ethics and integrity include honesty. If the City Council is being honest, they cannot ignore this as well. Council did the right thing in July of last year. You have the opportunity to do the right thing again today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any online, Michelle?
Okay, Brad, if you'd like to speak, please unmute your mic and state your name and address, please. Brad, your mic should be on.
Can't hear him.
Oh, yeah, we can't hear you, Brad. Brad, we can't hear you. One moment.
You can hear us. We apologize. Can you speak now? We could just barely hear him. No. Can you speak again? We'll see if we can hear you. The answer is no.
Okay.
Oh, there. Victory.
Oh, we're good.
We're good.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much. I don't even know if this is the right time for these comments. They're in reference to the conditional use permit that's going to be coming up for discussion for that resolution. Is this the right time to make comments on that?
This is the right time, the perfect time and the only time.
Excellent. All right. Hey, well, thank you for having me. My name is Brad Schuster. I'm from Kirkland, Washington, but I represent the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, the largest aviation community in the world. I do cover the Alaska and Northwest Mountain region area to include over 2,000 members in Montana and several hundreds close to Whitefish. On behalf of these members, I'm requesting a final determination regarding the appeal of the Whitefish Conditional Use Permit WCUP 2405 be made. We rarely get involved with real estate related legislation. However, in this case, it's our understanding that tonight's City Council meeting, the resolution will be introduced to revoking the use permit 2405, a request to develop a hangar at Whitefish Airport. While how political subdivisions manage their own affairs to include platting, zoning, permitting policies, clearly up to the respective political subdivision, we're dismayed that the council is seemingly revoking the subject conditional use permit without at least providing a final ruling, at least to my knowledge, on the appeal itself. To that end, and per Whitefish Code 12.2.8 appeals, the appellant must be directly aggrieved and the appeal must be based upon the misinterpretation of the regulations. Since I'm not in a position to question the second part of that criteria regarding interpretation of regulations, I do, on the other hand, feel that I have a strong case in discussing the fact that the appealing parties have failed to prove their case as being legitimately aggrieved parties. And I'm not just saying that just for the record, also saying that for precedence and for future consideration as these appeals come forward in your community. Per Montana Code 49.2.101, the aggrieved party means a person who can demonstrate a specific personal and legal interest as distinguished from a general interest, who has been or is likely to be specially injuriously affected. It is our view that aggrievement standard has not been met, and that the appeal of the approval of conditional use permit 2405 should, for the record, be rejected. If indeed the resolution to revoke conditional use permit 2405 is passed tonight, it will send a chilling signal not only to aviators, but also to those in the future who might want to develop a legitimate aeronautical development on the airport. And also chilling messages would be going out to Whitefish developers at large, as this process has been extremely costly and time consuming for the permit applicant. To ensure there's closure in the Whitefish appeals process, specifically with respect to previous approval of conditional user permit WCUP 2405, we respectfully request a final ruling on the applicant's appeal, whether accomplished prior to the file to and following issuance of the resolution for revocation or beforehand. Appreciate you allowing me to speak, and I'm available for questions.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for this comment? Not seeing any. Thank you so much for attending and putting up with our glitches, but thank you very much.
Yeah, and you guys sound great right now, by the way. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Steve?
Angie, it's clear that the Community Development Board has the final say in the appeals process, or is that unclear at all?
That's very clear.
Okay.
So they have the final say with respect to the appeal of the zoning administrator's decision with respect to the setbacks.
Okay.
This is not an appeal of that. If that were to be appealed, it would have to go straight to district court. The decision in front of you guys is not to second guess what the Community Development Board decided. agree or disagree with it, you're stuck with it. Pardon me. The decision before you is whether or not to revoke the CUP, because pursuant to the Community Development Board's decision, the applicant really cannot comply with our zoning code as it now stands per the Community Development Board.
And so would he wouldn't be able to build then? He wouldn't be able to get a building permit, correct?
He would not be able to obtain a building permit. And this one's a little interesting. Generally, when you folks consider whether to revoke a conditional use permit, it's a condition that could be mitigated, or if staff found that the condition wasn't being met, you guys could look at that and be like, well, we disagree with staff, really, we feel like the condition is being met, it's landscaping, it's lighting, it's something to that effect. Here, there's no way that he could meet that condition at this point.
Okay, so technically, for anybody to build anything on any airport that is in city limits, they would have to be 300 feet from the property line.
Yes, from the airport.
And
The
Dave,
airport itself.
was that the intent of that initial zoning code?
I mean, when that was written, we were specifically looking at helicopter landings, and it should have said airstrip or landing strip or something, but it just ended up airport the way it came out. John Phelps and I put that together, and it was just an oversight. So.
Okay. So in order to have any sort of building with an airport, which is unlikely at this point in town anyway, but in order to do that under the current zoning code, the way it's written now and interpreted by the CDB,
Yep.
you'd have to have 300, any building would have to be 300 feet from the nearest, from the property line, and then the aviation regulations require those buildings to be a certain number of feet from the active runway, correct?
Yeah, as far as I know. But yeah, so I mean, the existing sheds and things out there would be made non-conforming.
Okay. So. Well, they are now. Well, yeah, they are now. And the houses that are that are along the airport are also non-conforming now, is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that, but
Okay.
potentially.
We haven't measured how far they are, but some of them are likely to be within 300 feet of the runway. Or
Potentially.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
I would entertain a motion.
I move to revoke CUP 25-25 based on the staff's recommendation and the decision of the Community Development Board.
24-05.
24-05.
I want to make sure we're clear on it.
Seconded by Councilor Davis. Any further discussion?
I just want to say that I hope that people who have spoken out against us revoking this CUP understand that we really don't have a choice. And even if we let it go, the hangar wouldn't be allowed to be built anyway because city staff wouldn't be allowed to issue a building permit. I let my comments at the CDB meeting stand on their own, and I was one of two people who voted in opposition to the majority.
Rebecca.
Yeah, this was really complex and interesting, but I think it brought to the city's attention that we probably need to do more analysis out in that area. And so I'll be hopefully talking about that under councilor comments, especially since we already have like 3 or 4 hangars out there, and there's been increased use over the last 5 years or so with the intention to turn this into a more robust airport. I think it requires us to do more detailed analysis. From what I understand is this 300-foot setback is only based on helicopters and dust. And so I think the MCA reversed a lot of the standards for airports. But we still have to look at safety. And for me, I think this is a safety issue for us not to understand more about the impact of having a more active airport in that area. So, and I just want to thank you, the public, for the robust discussion. It's hard for the applicants to accept, I'm sure, but it's kind of why we have a great community to get the right answer. All right, thank you.
Ben?
As previously stated, I'm obviously supporting this motion because I don't think we have any other option. So I do so without expressing any opinion really on the merits of the zoning determination that was made, as that decision is final. I do think this complicated situation seems to stem from essentially unclear zoning text, and I think at some point or another we should address that. That day is obviously not today, and so this is what needs to happen. I also wanted to state I did watch the planning board hearing, the recording of it. There were some comments made that I found to be distasteful regarding the ethics of people involved, and I did want to repudiate those comments for the record. Thank you.
Anything further? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. And again, for the public's information, we had no choice, but thank you so much. All right, moving on. Next, we have communications from our city manager, Dana.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. In the packet, you have my manager's report. I'll give you a brief update on the legislative session. Mayor Mulfeld testified in support of House Bill 378, which would remove the restrictions on inclusionary zoning. That is a bill carried by Representative Debo Powers. Senator Fern has Senate Bill 172 that is scheduled for a hearing this Thursday at 9 a.m. He has a bill this bill is about resort tax and would open up the opportunity for the city of Whitefish to utilize the additional 1%. Right now we have a 3% resort tax. Other communities and resort tax areas and districts have had the opportunity to add an additional 1% to go up to 4% for infrastructure. This bill would then actually make it available to Whitefish. We were left out of the original bill because our population exceeds the threshold to become a resort community. But now the text, as amended, this has gone through the Senate and was approved through the Senate, so it's now in the House, which is good news. It's making its way. Would allow Whitefish to have that, or any resort community that does eventually exceed the population threshold, they would still get to utilize that 1% if they were a resort community by January of 2025. So these like original communities are going to be the ones that are protected to be able to have this 1%. So that 1% now also includes the opportunity not just for infrastructure, but for workforce housing. And that's an additional change in that bill. So we will be speaking in support of that. Our lobbyists will be in person that day. Also, Senator Fern has Senate Bill 304, which will update our lakeshore laws. That bill actually is very unique. I think if you recall, we had an issue with a property in the county that did some blasting and contaminated the lake or did damage to our lake not too long ago. And the city's hands were really tied in what we could do. The property was in the county. Senate Bill 304 basically says that a city or town with a lake of no more than 5,000 surface acres in or proximate to the city or town, and that is the source of drinking water for that city or town, would then have the ability to penalize and stop construction for a landowner that violates this section, essentially. And so we would be able to have some type of recourse in a situation where Whitefish Lake is contaminated, because that is a source of our drinking water here at the city. I don't know how this bill will go. There's other lakeshore law changes proposed by Senator Hertz that would actually allow for non-conforming or approved improvements within the lakeshore area to be essentially permanent, even if done illegally,
if they aren't caught within 3 years. So it's going to increase some of our enforcement needs. And so, yeah, I don't understand it, you know, other than he might have something on, like, I don't know why you would have that bill. You're basically saying those that are doing bad get to get away with it. Anyways, so that's another bill. We are opposing that one, but we will be supporting Senator Fern on his 2 bills that I just mentioned. Again, it's just going crazy there. We have, there's 563 House bills, 359 Senate bills that have been assigned numbers. I did look back to last session to see where we're at the same time. And this year, we have 4,370 bill draft requests. Last year, there was 4,607 bill draft requests and 345 Senate bills, 543 House bills. So we have a little bit more in the numbers that we're actually seeing as of today and less requests for bill drafts, but still very high and very, very similar to last session. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Stuff is moving fast. We're keeping up as we can, but there are definitely more zoning related, development related bills that are coming out related to, for example, like no parking requirements. That is carried by Representative Regier, Amy Regier, I believe. There's ones for building height being no less than 6 feet. 6 stories, I always say 6 feet. 6 stories, you couldn't control anything lower than 6 stories in commercial areas. And then obviously going to essentially from a single family zoning last session, we went to basically duplex, 2 unit. Now they're looking at putting that to 3 and 4 plexes. So there's a lot of changes that we're trying to work through, and our Drew is there and meeting with representatives and senators from all walks of life is how I like to say it. So stay tuned. If you have questions on specific bills, please let me know. If you ever want to, you'll see my tracking sheets in the with my manager's report. If you have questions on specific bills, I'm happy to answer questions about those or anything else in my manager's report at this time.
Any questions for Dana?
Dana, it seems like you're much calmer this year than last year, you and Angie both. So it's going well with our lobbyist?
It is going really well. Drew and I are in communications all the time, texting any time of the day, weekends, you name it. So that's been really great. You know, it's my 3rd session that I've had under my belt. Last session was kind of crazy compared to the one before that, so I kind of understand and was expecting what we have going on. So yeah, that's helpful. Their new system is somewhat helpful too, because although their website's not great because you don't know if a hearing's really scheduled or not because it's not very accurate and being updated quickly, but the exporting and bill tracking that they have available now, I find actually very useful because you can export and you can tag things for how you are tracking it. You can assign it to a category. So there's more functionality on the bill tracking side on their website once you really get the handle of it. Not necessarily user friendly, but once you learn it, it's really great. So
You've developed skills and we have a great lobbyist. Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for the update.
Okay, not seeing any. Next, we have a review of the request from Tamarack Ridge, HOA, and I think that's Craig.
That's actually a tag team, so I'm going to start it off, but Craig can definitely step in. This is a joint staff report. But you have heard from Paul Burton earlier. We had been working with him, discussing what the process would be to consider moving a privately designed and developed road into a public road. The Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Tamarack Ridge was approved by council in June of 2017. The 60-foot roadways, Merganser Court and Harlequin Court, within those subdivisions were approved as privately owned and maintained, but open to the public. The roadways do not conform to city requirements for public roadways, and often this costs less for the developers to construct, so there was benefit that they received by going to a private roadway versus public. We did secure a utility easement to service water and sewer infrastructure as part of that approval process, so you have that regardless of it being public or private. I did include a copy of the plats so that you can see those. There is a condition that states this dedication is made with the express understanding that the private roadways will never be maintained by any government agency or public authority. So this is definitely your discretion. In early 2024, we were contacted by Paul and started to discuss this process of how a city would accept dedication of a roadway. As you heard, we had done so previously with a road with Haugen Heights that was close to that area or within their HOA. To help the process move forward, we did ask that they provide a letter to the city council to formally request the dedication, and so that you have also in your packet. And Public Works does not maintain roadways that are built only to a private roadway standard right now. And so I think, and Craig can correct me if I'm wrong, but the section of road that was dedicated back to the city for Haugen Heights was a public roadway standard?
Yeah, it was built wider, and it also served a number of other properties beyond Tamarack Ridge, up into the county, as well as, I believe, the lots across the street from Tamarack on Haugen Heights were not subdivided yet into the county, or we're still in the county.
And so we did ask that question, whether or not the HOA would be interested in reconstructing the roadways to meet public roadway standards, and that was not an interest. Obviously, the cost would be prohibitive. The acceptance of this roadways would increase maintenance costs for our street fund. For fiscal year 25, we're estimating that to be about $5,400. While the increased revenue may pay for a portion or all of the snow plowing and maintenance costs each year, it would not cover the anticipated overlay that would be required in 8 to 10 years, which is estimated about $120,000. The staff is not necessarily providing you a recommendation for this one, just to review their request and provide us direction. If you do want to proceed, we would have to go through the process of amending the plat. And we do caution just on the precedence of changing roadways after final plat, especially those that do not meet the public roadway standards. You can see that just Haugen Heights alone has created this request. But as you heard earlier, there were other concerns from the HOA that would make this more palatable for their property owners in that area. So if you have any questions, Craig or I would be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks. Questions for Dana?
Craig, could you talk a little bit about the difference between the construction of the private road and the public road? What is the difference exactly?
Yeah, so public roads have curb, gutter, boulevards, typically concrete sidewalks on both sides. They're built to normally a 24-foot width, 12-foot driving lanes, which are much easier for our equipment to maneuver in. For this particular request, the HOA is simply trying to dedicate the pavement essentially to the city. They would maintain the swales and the stormwater drainage system, as well as the asphalt path that's on one side of the road. But yeah, I mean, that's the general difference between a public roadway and a private roadway, is width, sidewalk, curb and gutter.
So, I mean, let me pull up one recent example that hasn't gone well, is the lakes. I know that we had numerous members of the Lakes neighborhood in here asking us to repair their private roads because they were built to essentially a substandard condition. which we declined. I mean, do you see that as a risk with something like this? I mean, is the gravel base under the road to the same standard? Is the road, the paving itself to the same standard?
Yeah, I mean, that, you raise a good point. The city doesn't have the same level of involvement in inspection of private roadways, but I can tell you from the condition of those roads, they were built well. The lakes, the example you brought up, those are public roads. They were built to, well, they were designed to public roadway standards. They were just built during a time when there was a considerable amount of development happening. City staff wasn't as robust as we are now in the inspection process, and it's just a tricky place to build. I mean, you're essentially building in a swamp, you know. Tamarack Ridge is on a ridge.
I mean, do you, if this council was to approve this, can you maintain this road? I mean, does this fit into your work scheme?
We could likely maintain this subdivision with our existing staff. My concern is every other private subdivision, you know, that's been constructed in the last 10 years is going to be in line, and at that point, we're definitely adding crew. You know, and each one is going to have to be evaluated. I mean, Rock Ridge, for example, you know, across Highway 93 is not a subdivision that I have any interest in maintaining.
Because of how it's constructed?
Just because of those road widths are really difficult for, you know, a typical pickup plow. You know, if we're trying to get our loaders and, you know, dump trucks up there, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So do you, I mean, do you feel that the increase in the tax revenue that would come out of this sufficiently covers our costs to maintain it?
I think it covers the cost to plow the roads on an annual basis, but I don't think it's not gonna add enough to the coffers to cover actual roadway maintenance, repair and maintenance.
Okay.
You know, add to that, you know, we also perform leaf collection on public roadways. We do not on private roads, so that's a whole nother service that would be added if we were to take these roads over.
Steve?
We do have right-of-way underneath their roadway though, right? Or is it not under the road like we would usually do?
We have, yeah, the plat states that the city has the ability to maintain, repair and replace the public utilities under the roadway, within the 60-foot private roadway.
And they would have no ability to not let you in to fix something?
No, that's currently on the plat, on the face of the plat.
Okay, so there was a mention of something like that in their letter. The other thing that they mentioned in their letter is keeping the roads open to the public to walk their dogs on. Is that's already something that you can't restrict access in the city, can you? For those kinds of things on roadways?
This one says that, I believe their plat states that it's for public use.
Okay.
Let me see what I wrote in my stuff.
Because I know we don't allow gated communities, so they're not gonna be able to put a gate on there if they decide that they want to, right?
Yeah, it was a condition of approval for the subdivision that the roads be open to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca?
Is it possible to have them do a special improvement district to make up the amount that we wouldn't be getting so that they could proceed with this?
So typically, when you do that, you're doing the construction along with that. We could look at that. Their current assessment, like total collections for all the properties affected, they have, I think it's 7 properties that are already under the public street assessment because they're facing Haugen Heights. The ones remaining would provide an additional about $5,400 in additional revenue. So if we were to look at doing assessment, you know, it would probably do, you know, 20 years or something like that. And it, you know, even if it's 120,000, You know, we could look at doing that, but again, usually it's when you're doing the actual construction. We would have to be very clear that our street maintenance, which I think we have with JP Road and all the other SIDs, that when it comes time to doing an improvement out there, we could look at doing an SID, but generally that's a full reconstruction and not just an overlay. So it would be abnormal, you know, but the street assessment for all properties don't necessarily cover the cost of overlay. If you look at what we're collecting for these homes, if they were built to public roadway standards and we were collecting that amount, you know, in 20 years, we still have to redo the road. Our street maintenance assessment, I don't think, has ever covered overlays completely, which is why we also utilize like our fuel tax allocation and others for overlays, other revenue.
It sounds like we'd lose money doing this, but they really want it. Is there any other advantage to doing it for the rest of the city's standpoint?
I don't see an advantage necessarily, but I will say it's a better proposal than asking us to take care of the sidewalk or the paths in addition to the street, which would be typically what we would see. They've committed to maintaining that section.
Dana, is it fair to say that all of our, to the extent we're getting street assessment fees from all our taxpayers, those street assessment fees are not fully covering the cost of their overlays? Is that correct?
I would say that's
so
correct.
This would not be any different for this particular section of road or these property owners than anybody else in the city. Is that correct?
I would say that's correct, just with the caveat that this is a private road design versus public road design. Right. So they have been paying a street maintenance assessment fee as a private road. It's just a substantially smaller. Now you ask why, and that's because they utilize our arterial main roads where we are having private properties that front a private road do pay a portion for their use of our arterial roadways.
Right. Okay. So what this does from an economic perspective is just simply puts them on the same footing as everybody else in the city.
Yeah, the only thing that you would consider is that possibly the cost of their lots were less at the time of purchase because the cost of the private roadway design and development was less. So they likely received a benefit of not building to full city standards from a cost perspective when purchasing their property. So I couldn't say that it's exactly the same, but it would definitely be the same as those on Haugen Heights that we just transferred over not too long ago.
Thank you. Sure.
So if we proceed with this and approve it, does it create a precedent that we could be sued over by other developers?
I'll leave that to my legal expert sitting next to me, but I believe the plat was approved, and you know, this is how plats are with a private roadway, that it's very explicit that they would not be maintained by a government agency. So I don't think so, but it doesn't mean you can't have the requests come forward and potentially then you get into an issue. I'll leave that up to Angie, though, to answer.
I think Dana kind of answered it for me. Yeah, I mean, if the plat explicitly says that, I'm so sorry, I'm getting sick, that they're, yeah, as I'm right next to you, that they're, you know, privately maintained, I think it puts you folks in the position of evaluating each request as it comes forward, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. But I think you are going to see requests come forward and you're going to have to evaluate those individually.
I do think the difference with this one is the issue of Haugen Heights and some of their properties in phase 1 or 2. Was it phase 1? Phase 1 that. Phase 1, 7 lots. Phase 1. 6 in phase 1, 1 in phase 2. So 6 in phase 1 and one in phase 2 got moved onto a private roadway already. So I don't think you'll likely run into a scenario where you have 2 phases of one subdivision have this issue of having private and public, and that change was actually initiated through our, however that change came forward. It was approved by council for that Haugen Heights, so it is unique in that situation.
Great. This was not a public hearing, so I'll turn it back to council for a motion.
I would move that we direct staff to not accept the dedication of Merganser Court and Harlequin Court. I don't like the idea that when we have something that's platted to be a private road for them to come back and say, well, actually now we want to be a public road. I don't understand all of the issues with Haugen Heights Road, but this is not an arterial that leads to anything else. This is just 2 courts that kind of dead end with private homes on all sides of those roads, and I think that's a big difference for me. We have lots of other private subdivisions or private roaded subdivisions in the city, and there is a benefit to not building out to city standards for them, and that's what happened here. And I don't think the cost benefit analysis for the city works out in our favor on this one.
Ben?
I do have some mixed feelings about this. On one hand, I'm going to support the motion because I don't think that this is sufficiently different from every other private road that we have in this town. And it's not even that old. It was just recently done, and I think that's the way it's set up, and I don't know really how to evaluate this change in a broader way as it would apply to everybody else. So that's why I'm going to support it. But I'm also going to say that I have some problems with the structure that we have of this stuff, and specifically that it seems like we have a combination of cost incentives on the developer side and regulations that seem to force most neighborhoods into private roads, which also forces them into HOAs. And I have some issues with that. I don't know, for example, I would ask the question, why is this a private road? I don't know. Why, maybe it should have been a public road to begin with. Does every neighborhood need an HOA? I think these are bigger picture questions that we aren't answering tonight, but I think that they're relevant, and I hope that we do someday address those questions. But I just don't think we can in the context of this one request. So, thank you.
Rebecca?
Well, I'm going to support it, even though I respect what you guys are saying, mostly because Craig believes that it's built to good standards. I think if it's a one-on-one decision, that when people are trying to integrate, I'm supportive of it.
So if I interpret that correctly, you're going to vote against the motion. For my part, I'm also not going to support the motion under the circumstances. I believe that these streets probably should have been public to begin with. I see that from an economic perspective, what I'm being told is that this road and these homeowners will receive no additional benefit from the city as a practical matter than they're otherwise supporting as any other resident on any particular road in the city of Whitefish. We can do this. This is not a road that's constructed in a way that we can't manage snow plowing and those kinds of things. So it's not a stretch for me to say that I think we ought to include this in the city and ought to approach it that way. So I will not be supporting the motion. With that said, all those in favor? All those opposed, like sign? And the motion fails. Is there another motion anybody would like to entertain?
like to make a motion to approve the Tamarack Ridge
Yep.
to be incorporated in the city maintenance of their roads.
And for pro forma, go ahead.
Point of order, what happens if this ties?
The motion fails. You can
I
make
think at
another
this point,
motion. You can make
we're
another
just looking
motion.
for direction to move forward. So I think the motion should be direct staff to work with the HOA to revise the plat, essentially.
Right. But to your point, Ben, and as you correct me, the motion does not carry. So it fails. Once it fails, a second motion can be made and see if it can pass. So that's where we are.
What happens if it continues to tie?
We
It
could make a
fails.
motion to move this to the next meeting when we
So,
have
yeah,
John
I would
number.
recommend postponing it
Yeah.
if you feel that having a full council would be appropriate. This is really just us looking for direction to continue working with them to, draft up the plat and all of the work that would have to go into that. For your consideration, you'd have a resolution, I believe, on a future agenda, but so we could do that work, or we could wait till the next meeting, because obviously it's tied. I'm not gonna get a four hands to move forward, so really I just need like 4 supporting me to move forward with it, or a majority of you 3. So I think you have an option of postponing it till the next meeting when there's more council present, or it just dies and we leave it, and they'll likely submit another, maybe would submit a request when the full council's present.
But again, I think what Craig said has a lot of value. We're not changing the plat, we're not accepting dedication. You're just directing staff to move forward with at least looking into it. So it's not like you're just, if you guys are voting in favor or against, you're actually making it a public roadway here tonight.
I'll second Rebecca's motion.
To approve.
Consider moving forward.
Okay. Further discussion? Not seeing any. Go ahead, Ben.
I'm gonna, go ahead, Michelle, you first.
I'm sorry, what was the motion? Because I didn't hear, I heard that you approved, but now we're moving forward?
Yep. So I would like to correct my motion to say, I'm making a motion for the city council to consider the dedication of Merganser Court and Harlequin Court and provide the staff direction to consider making them part of our public roadway. And come back to city council later.
And I will second that.
Go right ahead.
I'm gonna change my vote. And I'm gonna do it because, well, first of all, it's gonna come back to council, so we're gonna vote on it with a full council later. I think it's not a big enough issue to warrant any additional council time, frankly, by pushing this off and redoing it all again later. In general, I support the idea of public roads. While I have maybe some concerns about the broader process, I think in this case, anyway, I'm just gonna change my vote. We'll move it forward and see what happens.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign? We have direction? Good. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is consideration of approving the tentative fiscal year 26, is it that time again, budget calendar.
Yes, welcome to budget season. It's upon us. And Lainey's been working fast and furious to start that process, getting budget spreadsheets and software updated for directors to utilize in March. There's only one difference this year that I wanted to bring to your attention on the budget calendar, is that the due date for the preliminary budget, I have proposed pushing that back to May 19th. The reason for that is usually it is due the first Monday in May. The legislative session will still be underway. Or it will have just finished, actually, I believe. It'll have just finished. And I'm gonna need a little bit of time to figure out how I can even assess property taxes and try to see if there's a way we can be as accurate as possible. And some of it might be where the preliminary budget is extremely preliminary this year. But I did want to just bring that to your attention. So it only gives you, I think, what is that? 8 days or so. Oh no, 7, 8, 9 days to review the budget document before the first budget work session, but we do go through it in a significant amount of detail at that work session. So as long as you're okay with that, I do ask that you look at May 27th, which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and June 9th as our tentative budget meetings. Try to keep those clear so you can hear updates from myself and directors. But it just lays out the schedule to ensure that we're in compliance with state law. So just need a good head nod, this looks good, or you guys approve it
Do you
going
need
forward.
a motion, or can we just nod?
Thumbs up, nod,
Okay.
what do you need?
Thumbs up, nod, whatever you want. As long as we're all having head nods that I can proceed with this, that's great. Okay.
I will be out of town in those 2 June dates, but I'll do my best to attend online.
Okay, great.
Great. Next item, a letter from the Whitefish Community Center requesting funds for staff compensation.
So as you can see, the letter was addressed to me, but this is a request from the Whitefish Community Center. Tom is here, if you'd like to, if I could recognize him to provide some other comments on his letter. But basically, it's a well-written letter. He had met with me to discuss this, and I said the best place to go is put this in front of council. It might be something you consider to delay making a decision until we get through the legislative session, but again, that's up to you, how you want to incorporate this. But
Tom, come on down.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate very much the time you gave me in your office and for having us here today. Council members, thank you for your time and attention to what we're requesting here this evening. I have here some additional information on some of the activities that we do at the center.
That's all right.
Sorry, we can share.
We can share. We're good. And we'll give one of these to Michelle for the record.
I'd like to give you a little bit of brief history of how if you're not familiar with the Whitefish Community Center, how this all has come about, why we've come here to ask you for some assistance in defraying some of our costs. Approximately 4 years ago, the Whitefish Community Board looked at what we were doing in the city of Whitefish. We were mainly doing Meals on Wheels for the county, Flathead County. The building itself is built and owned by the county. The property is owned by the city of Whitefish. Prior to that 4 years where we started to make a change, we had one person who just did Meals on Wheels, coordinated the drivers, coordinated the meals, and was responsible for being there at the center, helping those people who also had social meals have a place to sit and enjoy their meal. As the board grew and got more familiar with the city of Whitefish, we decided that we would want to call it not the Senior Center anymore, but we wanted to call it the Whitefish Community Center, because it is a center for the community of Whitefish. And from that time, we went to one additional paid employee. I must say that the Meals on Wheels employee is compensated by the county of Flathead County for Meals on Wheels. So partially their wages are covered for doing that specific job. Now the city of the center does a lot more activities than we used to do in prior years. I've given you a list of some of those activities that we do, and I've also showed you the average attendance for some of those activities that we do. And we have a total, if we go for all of last year, we had over 3,800 people come through the center. That's a lot of people. That's both residents and non-residents that come to the center. To give you an example of how we've changed, is the amount of activities. I might have passed that out to you by mistake, but we do take, for example, a family that moves here to Whitefish is looking for a place to get acquainted to the city or to the area of Whitefish, the community. We now have a program where mothers can bring their children to the center and get acquainted with new children and with other mothers and enjoy the center and have activities there as well. We do other things like we build community projects there. We have mediation services. We have services that we offer for individuals that need help in counseling. We've done speaker series there for the people in the community. We do rentals there. Those rentals take time to do. Those are done by our executive director. And we offer those facilities for people who have celebrations of life, people who do weddings for their receptions. We have birthdays. We have anniversaries. Some of the reunions from the graduates of the Whitefish Communities School, high school, have had their reunions there. And we charge a very nominal rent. And we do that because it is your center. And we want to make it that way so that the people don't have to pay a tremendous amount of money to rent a facility, say at a hotel or some other facility. But it costs us money to be able to do that, and it costs us money to pay for an executive director to manage that operation. Somebody has to be at the center all the time. Somebody has to be there when we have these events at the center, both at evening time and afternoon times. Someone has to be able to clean up afterwards and inform the rental agreements that we have with people. It all takes time. And so because of that, we're asking the city if they can participate like the county does in assistance for our executive director. It doesn't have, it can be by the form of just a monthly check to the center, or however you'd want to do it. Before, when we first started out, 4 years ago, it only cost us about $22 an hour, and the executive director worked about 25 to 30 hours a week. Well, since that time, we've grown so much that, of course, the labor costs have gone up, and our commitments to the community have grown, so that we are open even longer now. And our wage now is up to about $26 an hour, and they're working about 30 hours a week. It kind of gives you an idea. So also, someone has to maintain the facilities. The facilities are maintained by us. People come into the facility. We are Whitefish, and we are your greeting party that people are wanting to see. We'll get people that come in just off the street wanting to know how do they get used to get their food stamps online. How do they use a computer to get connected to the Whitefish City website? Because it does say on the building, the Whitefish Community Center, we've become quite a gathering place for people to come and get acquainted with other people in the community as well. And that's another reason why our time and efforts there have led to this amount of participation by people within the community and the use of the facility. Someone has to maintain the outside of the building. We do that. We do the shoveling. We do the snow shoveling. We do the planning. We take care of the painting. We take care of the furniture in the facility. We do everything there on behalf of the community and for the city of Whitefish. And any help that you can give us in that would be most appreciated.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any questions?
Any questions from council? Ben?
Just curious, I don't need exact numbers, but what is your annual budget approximately, and what percent?
Right now, about 60,000.
So this would be raising it from 60 to 100?
No.
Oh.
I mean, right now, the reason why it's 60 is because of our contributions we receive from the Great Fish. We participate in that. So that covers all of our expenses. But if we were to fail and not be able to earn 60,000 through funding of that through the Great Fish, we might not be able to afford our executive director's position. So I guess the answer to your question, yes, if there was any funding, the extra would be more than 60,000.
So would you continue to do the Great Fish Challenge if this funding is provided?
What's that?
Would you continue to do the Great Fish Challenge if this funding is provided?
Yes, because what we would want to do is that we want to provide more activities for people free. We have a toenail clinic for the elderly people, for anybody. We do that monthly or every 2 months, and we don't charge for that expense. We have Mahjong, we have dancing there, we have a lot of other activities there. We have Tai Chi, we have other activities, and we try not to charge people. We take people on excursions throughout the year, especially during the summertime, and we try to keep those expenses so that we don't have to charge people for it, but if we do, we just want to break even.
And and I say if we are not able to find that level of funding in our current budget, would a reduced amount still help you?
Yes.
Steve?
And this would be an ongoing commitment that you're asking for year over year?
Yes, we just signed a 5-year lease with the city. We would like to have a commitment on a yearly basis. You're certainly welcome to sit in on our board meetings. You're certainly welcome to see our financials. You're certainly welcome to come to the city, our facility at any time to observe what we do there, and we would encourage you to do so. We like the involvement from the city.
Okay.
Rebecca?
Yeah, you do an incredible amount of good work for very little money. So I just wanted to say thank you
Well,
before
thank
we
you.
start discussing our money. All right, thanks.
What do we need? Dana, what do you need from us?
Where does this fit?
My recommendation would be to, if you are interested in providing funding to the community center, that you would provide direction to me to attempt to include a contribution in the preliminary budget. If, just given, I can tell you, I know that the snow bus is coming at your next meeting asking for money also, so be prepared. We're talking about council compensation, we're talking about property taxes, maybe not even having the ability to increase our property taxes, so there's a lot of competing for me. Rebecca says I'm handling the legislative session good. It's probably just because I can't think about the property tax side much because it does stress me out. If it wasn't a legislative session, I would say you have available mills. If I wasn't worried that those would go away, I'd say you have the available mills. Whatever you provide will likely be a tax increase, knowing that you could decide how to proceed. $40,000 is roughly a half a mil. And so it's probably more helpful for you to make a decision if we have a little bit more knowledge about what's going to happen at the state level and what ability we have to raise taxes to accommodate additional costs. Otherwise, you could look at cutting in certain areas, but departments have been cutting budgets for years since I've been here. That's why we've kept property taxes low, so we're getting down.
Steve?
What would separate this relationship or differentiate this from what we have with the library if this is something that we add into our yearly plan?
The library is a city library, and so we levy mills on behalf of the library as a city library. And they're a board that is appointed by the council. So different than the community center, which is a separate nonprofit. We do lease the land. The building is owned by the county. We lease the land. We do provide $1,500 to the community center to cover outdoor irrigation and lighting as part of that lease. So that's like an annual amount the council has provided to them every year. But that was not for salaries by any means, so.
Okay. I had another question, but it flew out of my brain, sorry.
Okay.
Ben?
Is there any other analogous nonprofits that are supported through taxpayer funds?
The snow bus, Eagle Transit, we pay the insurance on the O'Shaughnessy Center and the Wave, both city facilities that are operated by nonprofits. And the Housing Authority, we do give their PILT back. Again, that board's sat by the city. I think from a non-appointing, board perspective, you're looking at the snow bus and Eagle Transit, and the community center. The community center has been in our budget for many years now with that $1,500, so it is a piece of property we own. If you're giving one-time grants for capital, you've, I think, done that for Smith Fields with the resort tax. Whitefish Trail, it's a nonprofit, building trails that are dedicated to the city. So, it's just, this is really discretionary in that if it's a service that you find the city should be supporting, other than the $1, I think, a year lease of the land, if you want to contribute more, it's going to be up to you guys to decide what's appropriate. $40,000 would be extremely high. I say that right now, knowing that the snow bus request coming forward is even higher than that. So right now, though, the highest annual contribution we have to a similar organization is this, excluding the Whitefish Trail. Well, no, the Whitefish Trail is all funded by them. Take that back. Whitefish Trail is different. Snow bus, though, is $15,000. The Waves property insurance is $27,000.
Rebecca?
So could there be some kind of affiliation with Parks and Rec at all? I mean, because they're doing so many activities, and I think sometimes the kids are there. But
I don't know, you know, I think affiliation, like utilizing the facility, that I would have to, you know.
no, I'm
Marie would-
thinking money, like how to get funds to them.
Oh, well, I don't think
No.
Parks has any money, I mean, to hand out by any means. They're already taking from the general fund, so if I didn't have to transfer Maria money already, I would say sure, but the general fund is supporting Parks as well, so
Okay.
definitely a general fund contribution.
Can I offer some direction that we can discuss?
Sure.
I'd like to see what it would cost, and I mean, certainly not something we can agree to today, but I would like to see what it looks like in the next budget cycle, rather than, I mean, that would be my recommendation for direction tonight.
Rebecca, thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should try to find a way to do this, just because they do a tremendous amount of good for the community. Again, it means raising taxes, though, so I think I'd like to hear more about how we could make it happen.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great organization that in a lot of other municipalities would have taxpayer funds going towards it. With that said, you know, $40,000 a year in perpetuity and an already difficult budget year is going to be difficult. I do think with that kind of request, I do think Steve is right. It probably needs to come through our budget appropriations process. And I think maybe it's something we could start a tad smaller than the ask and see where it goes. Just a thought, but I think I would be interested in supporting this organization if there is a way to do so.
I would echo that as well. I think we ought to consider it both in the amount and what's possible as our next budget cycle gets underway. And your timing could not be better. As you may have heard earlier, we're considering the budget schedule now. So thank you for bringing this to our attention at this point. But I think the collective direction is, let's see what we can do and if we can do, and let's see what we can do. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. A letter from Richard Hildner regarding the proposed Star Meadow Fire District. Any comments from council or thoughts? Or Richard, do you want to address it?
I'll turn it over to Dana.
It's a test to see if you read my manager's report. In my manager's report, I did mention the proposed Star Meadows Fire District. After our work session, met amongst ownership and determined that there were other options that they would like to pursue than contracting with the city of Whitefish. So at this point, they have confirmed that plans to negotiate any type of contract are halted, and they would inform us if things change, but it sounds like they'll be utilizing an existing building, looking at hiring a fire chief and using volunteers. Based on their discussion with a risk assessment representative. So I don't know that we appreciate Richard's comments, but we aren't going to need them at this point.
My thought is that they are good reminders when they wander back. All right. All that's left here is councilor comments. Steve, please.
Yeah, just something that came up regarding the CDB. Phil Boland was in a bad car accident and is not going to be able to attend for at least this month, and potentially we don't know how much longer in the future, but it may only be 1 month. It may be longer. And in the absence of another member, we have the opportunity to temporarily appoint a member from the council to serve in that member's place. And so I'm asking for one of you to come Thursday night and be part of the show on Thursday. As an acting member of the planning board. You would have a vote and everything. I did think I did.
I'm the second for this, and so I don't know, but if somebody else is compelled.
So we wouldn't appoint anybody from the public, it has to be a city councilor?
We don't have the opportunity, from what I understand, to appoint someone from the public to serve. It would be another councilor member because it's not a permanent appointment. It's temporary.
Okay.
The only time I ever did a planning board meeting, I got voted down 5-1. So I nominate Frank if he's willing to do it.
Oh, what fun. Yeah.
It's gonna be an important meeting
Yeah.
that I think we should all pay very close attention to.
Okay.
You be there?
Comes with the duty.
Okay, thank you, Frank. My only other comment, and this is kind of a sad one, I was pulling into the Cedar lot yesterday, and I noticed that it was back up to $15 for the Cedar lot to park there. And so I asked for a discount, locals discount, and Sean, the guy who works up there on the weekends, said, no, we don't have a locals discount. And I said, well, jokingly said, well, how about a city council discount? And he said, oh, you're on the city council. And I said, yeah, this might violate my ethics policy that we're currently working on.
Soliciting a bribe.
But he said, yeah, we don't have that. We don't have a city council. He said, we don't have a city council discount, but if you can help me get my Forest Service job back, I'd really appreciate it. So I immediately, said, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. And that you're in the boat of people that got laid off. And he got laid off on Valentine's Day. And he's trying to figure out what his next move is because he doesn't have a job now for the summer. And I know there was an article in the Beacon about it yesterday, but I just want us to be, because we live in a place where these layoffs are pretty close to home, that we're aware of these people in our communities and the work that they're doing for us and with us, and that it's going to hurt a lot, I think, around here. So, Sean, this is for you. I know you're probably not watching, even though I told you to watch tonight, but hang in there, buddy, and thank you for all the hard work you do up at WMR and what you have done for the Forest Service.
Thanks, Steve. Rebecca?
Couple things. I've been talking to Dana about whether or not we have the right as a chartered city to reach up to our congressmen and senators. And we have 2 grants. Craig informed me that it's kind of premature to do any advocacy at this point. One is for Safe Streets for All. Do you want to speak to that, Craig, just about the timeline of things?
Well, yeah, so your concern was regarding funding for the 2 grants the 2 federal grants that we currently have.
Yeah.
The Safe Streets for All plan, I'm sure everyone recalls, we just approved that at the last meeting, and we have, I don't have the exact numbers, whatever I emailed you, we have like $40,000 left to be reimbursed of the $160,000 grant, which I very much anticipate we'll get. We'll have that reimbursement submitted by the end of the month. The second one is the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant, where we just hired HDR as our consultant and have not submitted any reimbursement requests for that one. So that's still a little more in the air. The premature comment that I had was just your concern about an overpass at East 2nd Street affecting the airport, and I just cautioned that we haven't done any of the public outreach for the railroad crossing, and so I don't want to speculate what that plan is going to recommend.
Okay, thanks for that. I did speak to Julie Mullins at the Explore Whitefish today, and she's actually meeting with the Glacier Park superintendent tomorrow. He's called a meeting to talk about layoffs with the staff there. Worst case scenario, it might be 4 people laid off and 1 remaining. So they're planning for the worst case scenario, hoping people might get hired back. But I called her because I spoke to Dana about whether or not our 29-year history of having resort tax was enough of a hardship on us to lose some of the funding if we lose the whole tourism industry at Glacier too. But that sounds premature as well. We have to kind of wait and see how the federal government deals with all these layoffs, and they're being sued at this point, I think, and the unions are suing, and so right now I'm not going to pursue writing a letter to anybody yet. We'll just kind of have to see where it goes. But I know a lot of the public is very concerned about kind of the slash and burn that's going on with the federal agencies. And so I just wanted to bring this up, that we have one mechanism to advocate for ourselves at the federal level, which is their city manager approving us to have specific hardships that only Whitefish is going to endure because of these changes. We're not allowed to advocate for anything that affects everybody in the U.S., for instance, according to our charter. But for all the people that work for the Forest Service and Glacier National Park, sorry, it's going to be a hardship for a while, it sounds like. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is snow removal. We got a letter, an email from a man, and he commended our code enforcement officer for putting out 100 door knockers to remind people to remove snow. But I'm just bringing it up again because he's moved here from Aspen, and he thinks we should be doing better. So I don't know if there's anything as a staff that we can do other than notice people. Yeah, anyways, just wanted to remind people, please remove your snow on the sidewalks. And that's all for tonight. Thank you.
Ben?
No comments. Thank you.
I've got a couple. We had a public hearing earlier this evening regarding the CUP out at the airport. My reading of all these documents seems to me to indicate to me that this is a problem of self-creation by the city of Whitefish. I think we better own it. I would very much like to see planning staff come back to us with what they know should have been the law and should have been the zoning. And I'd like to personally like to see that in as short an order as it can be done. The other thing I would like to do is I would like for us to consider, and I think it's more than fair under the circumstance, because this hiccup that we've now created where we had to deny and withdraw a CUP, at a very minimum, I think we ought to consider as a city refunding to Billy McKinney, the applicant, his application fees. And or if we do get a zoning text amendment, and he reapplies, I think they should be waived at that time. I find it very difficult reading the staff reports and the history of this particular zoning regulation, that we didn't correct it before now. And I think that that's on us, and I think we better own it. And as with most things, I think it's better to own the problem and correct it as soon as you know about it. That doesn't exclude an idea that we may ought to take a look at the airport area if the council wants to do that. But I think we at least ought to fix the problem that we know is there and was totally unintended. Totally unintended. So I would like to at least maybe get a nod from everybody to at least pursue that level of correction here. Sure.
I actually think we already have an airport, what's it called, Dave? Airport something. It's like a whole region, I think we already have it in place. We just didn't know it because we have bunkers there and we have people that are already using it. So there's an expanded area that is already transporting private airplanes over to the runway and back. And I do have some concerns about it being so close to the railroad for safety's sake, because the Trump administration approved liquid nitrogen gas being transported by trains, and that's now on hold because they have to do an environmental assessment, but they can explode. They're called bomb trains. And so there are safety issues that I think we need to look at too. So I think we should be looking at an overlay, a formal analysis of the safety issues, and then looking at where we can find standards, because the MCA doesn't have them. The only standard for the FAA is that 300-foot helicopter standard. So we're dealing with a kind of a unique situation. Even I talked to the lawyer at MDT, and there's very little oversight.
I understand that, Brent. Rebecca, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that at some point.
Oh.
What I'm saying is we have a very specific problem that's been identified for us that was totally of our making, and we just ought to fix that. If we go on to do other things.
You mean you're
that's-
talking about the 300-foot setback?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I agree it's a problem, but you still have to come up with standards and a rationale for things. And so if there isn't...
That was the point. There is no rationale for the way this has been interpreted. There is no rationale based on any legislative history that I've been able to see or glean that would indicate that it was ever, this 300-foot setback as applied here was ever intended to be applied there.
Well, it was applied in our whole city, so it was a standard, and it was applied because we had a helicopter land within city limits. Right. And it wasn't updated from that time forward.
It was never meant to apply to buildings on either helipads or airports. It was never meant for that. It was meant to protect neighbors from helicopters landing too close to them.
And I think the dust that is created by the helicopters.
Yeah, so that has absolutely nothing to do with what was going on at the airport. And
well, it's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity to fix the intent of the code, which I think we ought to do immediately. Dave, has there been any resolution on whether Mr. McKinney would have to reapply, or could that, just because it's been revoked, does it have to be reapplied, or can it?
Yeah, I mean, if the code changed, then he, could reapply. He came in and asked us to see if he could get it revoked before it went to the council because he was so sick of the whole process. But that's a whole nother matter. But
okay, so we would have to reapply even if the zoning changes.
I'm just saying I don't think he will, but he might.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, then I think we should refund him his CUP fee.
I'm going to agree with you that looking at the history of how this happened, it seems clear that there's a problem in the zoning and the process that needs to be addressed, and I think it should be addressed. My only thing is I'm not promising that I'm going to support that specific solution to it. I'm not saying I won't, but the first thing that comes to my mind is, are we looking at this in a holistic enough way about what our vision is for the airport? How does that text amendment square to our vision of the airport? How does that affect somebody else deciding to build an airport on a different property? Is building additional structures an expansion of use of an already non-conforming airport? I mean, I think there's a lot of questions there that require some discussion and some thought and some public debate. So I think, I'm not saying I don't want to bring that forward, but I'm saying that if it does, those are the things that I'd be looking for in the proposal. See where that goes.
Do you have enough support to at least begin work on that? Okay, that's great. I sure appreciate it. All right, I have nothing, you had.
On the refund of fees, could I just get a hand showing so it's clear to me? Okay, thank you.
And
is it something we could incorporate into the new growth policy as an airport plan? I know it might not be part of the current plan within the growth policy,
The
but
growth policy, you know, is a large document looking at the overall city. We'd probably have to do some kind of a specific plan, and we could call for that as one of the action items, that some kind of a plan be done, but it would really, you know, only a small portion of that airport's in the city, the rest of it's in the county, it's owned by the state. You know, we would have to have coordination with all those entities in order to do a plan for that airport, and I'm not sure how we do that, but.
okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else from staff? Anything else from council? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.